Everybody. My name's David and I'm Professor and Director of Entrepreneurship at Monash Business School. I have the enormous pleasure of leading the Entrepreneurship portfolio, and today we have a wonderful panel in the house to take you through elevating mindsets and some really important stuff around diversity and communities. Over to one of my fabulous team members, Nikki Tuckman.
Thanks, Dave. Welcome everyone to this special and exciting event today. We are very glad to have you here, and thanks for coming along. And hello to my co-moderator / work wife, Anna.
Thanks, DJ Nikki, and hello to you as well. I think it's safe to say we're pretty thrilled to be here today, another day in between the four walls of our homes. Now, Nikki, before we introduce our wonderful panelists today and kick off our discussion, let's quickly introduce ourselves and share with everyone why we wanted to discuss entrepreneurial capability, diversity and networks today. All right, Nikki, tell us, who are you and what do you do?
Okay, hey, my name's Nikki Tuckman. I've been working in the entrepreneurship portfolio for over 2 years now, and I manage the strategic and operational functions of the portfolio. My primary focus is to coordinate and manage the curriculum, co-develop new program offerings, and organise our global study tours in entrepreneurship and innovation. Anna, who on earth are you?
Thanks, Nick. My name is Anna Eisenbury. My role in the entrepreneurship portfolio involves everything that sits outside of the curriculum. So that includes strategic stakeholder engagement, community and student relations, and our portfolio events, which is one like this. So Nikki, a few weeks ago, we were chatting about this event, the final webinar in our eShip Extras series for 2020, and we were discussing what a valuable way we could end the series this year as plenty of our students and community begin to look at what's next for them, which is a valid question after this unprecedented year. And we landed on discussing entrepreneurial capabilities, diversity and networks. Now, it's a meaty topic and we've bitten off a fair bit to chew here, Nikki. Can you tell us all why we've picked this and what makes these things so important to our community and our portfolio?
Sure. Well, it's no small topic, but it's an integral part of our portfolio, as Dave mentioned earlier. Elevating mindsets is really about showing students that they're capable of far more than they think they are. We spend a lot of time challenging our students to get outside of their comfort zone, not because we want to make them feel uncomfortable, but because we want them to see that they are capable of so much. Similarly, the driver behind helping them to build their skills and capabilities is so when they leave us, they will be armed with a unique mindset and value that will give them an advantage in the world of work and the confidence to pursue anything they dream of. As people who are part of the entrepreneurship network, it's our job to ensure that the spaces and places which we work and innovate are both diverse and inclusive for our young people. So they can see that no matter who you are, you have something of value to offer. As we will discuss on our panel later, it's just better for business to work with people that are from different backgrounds.
Exactly right. I think it's so important for us as a community to ensure that we have all kinds of perspectives and experience that represent all human beings in what we teach, who we connect with, network and partner with.
All right, Anna, we can talk till the cows come home, but that's enough from both of us. Let's bring in the experts. So today we have with us 3 incredible business founders and owners who are part of our community and network to chat about these topics and their experiences.
Amazing. So first up, I'm excited to introduce you to Jen Sharp. She's the founder and managing director of Think HQ, an integrated communications agency who believes that communications can be harnessed as a positive form of impact.
Welcome, Jen.
Hi, everybody. Thank
Hello.
you.
Next, we have Eliza Lee, one of our very own Monash alumni students who came along with Dave and I on our study to Berkeley last year. And I love that you're representing there, Eliza. She's the co-founder and managing director of Halad to Health, an international NGO that is closing the gap in global health inequality through delivering accessible health education services. Welcome, Eliza.
Thanks so much.
Lastly, we have Dr. Zavit Inbar. She is a founder, she's a speaker, she's a CEO and director of Different Thinking, which is a boutique consulting firm specializing in strategic people, culture, leadership, ethics, design making, product and technology services. Is there anything you don't do? We also have one of our fantastic Monash Entrepreneurship students here with us today, Shreya, who will be moderating the Q&A later today. Welcome everyone. We are so glad to have you here today. Thanks for your time.
All right, let's kick this panel off. So starting off with you, Eliza, could you quickly walk us through your journey in entrepreneurship so far?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me first off. And I guess, yeah, like Nikki and Anna have said, I am the co-founder and managing director of Hallowed to Health now. But before all of that, I actually very much started off being born in New Zealand and coming across as a first generation migrant here in Australia. And growing up always, I had always seen my parents start from nothing and really put us through school through their businesses. And so I always knew growing up, having that culture of, business can do good. And so that's very much what I wanted to do when I grew up, is create a social business that was able to make a difference in people's lives, knowing that my parents had really put us through school doing that. And so by the time I got into university, so I started at Monash and went into an undergraduate of biomedicine and commerce, and by halfway through about second year, I really knew that I wanted to make a difference in health. And so I took a volunteering trip over to the Philippines, where for about 6 weeks in our summer break, we actually went around to some of the most Indigenous sort of remote communities and provided free life-changing cleft palate surgeries. And I thought this was like the most incredible thing to be able to do as a student. And obviously there were physicians doing sort of the surgeries, but I really asked the physicians and surgeons, like, what could we do as students to really make a difference here? Whilst we're all so young and everyone wants to make a difference, we just really don't know how. And turns out what they said to that was actually students can make a huge difference. And what they were doing, providing free surgery, should really be the last line, and what should really be the first line to make a really sustainable long-term change is provide free health education to prevent some of these diseases from happening in the first place. Simple things for us, like even knowing what clean water to drink, and that kind of thing, unfortunately, isn't taught in a lot of these rural and remote schools because they don't have the people to do so. And so that's where the whole idea of Hallowed to Health came about. And I knew one day down in the future, I would have, my own peers who are studying biomedicine or health related degrees to go over to volunteer and teach in some of those rural and remote schools. And that's exactly what we do now. So in my final year of studying at Monash, which is sort of where I met Dave and Nikki, I went on the Berkeley tour. I started sort of like a summer project to take some of my friends across and volunteer and just get to know sort of the community that we're going into. My co-founder is from the Philippines, so that he set all that up and made it all possible. And very much in the last year and a half, we've been able to teach over 5,000 students in that local community. And it's all sort of fully funded through all the services that we provide here in Australia. So that's what we do. And I guess our journey so far.
Amazing. Can't even express how proud we are of you. Zivit, how about you? Can you tell us a little bit through your entrepreneurial journey?
Thank you very much first for inviting me. My career actually started as an executive. I started, well, not in executive, started in Israel. Initially in a consulting firm that specializes in scaling up startups. So that's not recruitment, but all the support services for the startups to scale up. And then I moved into startups and scaled it up as executive with HR. So I've been 3 times scaling up startups and scale-ups, not as a founders, but as an executives all around US, Europe, and APAC. And then about 5 years ago, I had the worst time in my life in terms of, in 2 months, I had 2 surgeries and I lost my mom and I lost my father-in-law. It was everything all together. And I was just not in a place to look for a job. And at that time, and because of that, I also lost my job. And so I decided that, first of all, I'll take the time to heal, and then I'll go back to executive positions. And after the second surgery, I had a catch up with the father of someone from my network. And he's a coach of CEOs. And he said, look, I'm going to present you to this CEO and that CEO. And, but really, is this what you want to do? And I said, well, that's going to be my last C-level position in 5 years' time. I want to open my own consulting firm. And he said, why in 5 years' time? And I said, well, both my kids are in private schools. And he said, so? And I said, I answered, well, I'm scared, financially. And he said, you what? And I found myself, without even thinking, saying, you know what? Feel the fear and do it anyway, which is a book, by the way, that I recommend everyone reading. It's really, really a good book, which I live by. And I came back home and I said to my husband, guess what? I'm opening my own company. And he asked, doing what? Then I said, I have no idea. So he gave me 6 months time to bring my own first client. And I started ringing family and friends and people that worked with me from venture capitals in Tel Aviv and Silicon Valley, saying, you know me, you know what I can do. The ecosystem here is very young. What should I do? And took all their advice and open different thinking. After 4 months, I had my first paying clients. I came back home, dancing, said to my husband, I have a first paying client. He said, shit. And since then, we're not looking back. So it's been really an amazing growth and really challenging with COVID as well. But being able to working all the time with entrepreneurs, not only with entrepreneurs, I work with larger companies as well, but it's a great challenge. So basically 4 major services. One is selection, so helping investors in looking at the teams that they are investing in, helping scale up, selecting the right people to their teams, working with accelerators on selection. The second one is leadership, running leadership programs, coaching founders, working with managers that never managed before. Third service is Lean HR, which is all about talent, culture, and helping companies grow in terms of the workforce planning for the scalability plans. And when things go wrong, I'm called by the CEOs or the investors to do organizational diagnosis and put changes in place. So that's what we do.
Wow, amazing. And finally, Jen.
Hi everyone. I'm actually quite nervous today, but I found my fidget spinner from about 3 years ago and I've been playing with it and it's really effective. So a bit of background. I started 2 companies in 2010. One was called ThinkHQ and another one was called Show It Matters. Show It Matters failed in 2012. I finally said goodbye to that business and chose to grow ThinkHQ instead. I started ThinkHQ. I have a background in writing and not-for-profit and a whole bunch of things, but I'd found myself in a communications firm where I was managing all the projects relating to social justice work. So binge drinking campaign for the federal government, Indigenous eye care, all kinds of amazing projects. But in that same company, there was a consumer team who'd be working on projects that directly conflicted ethically with the projects I was working on. So I wanted to start a communications agency that was just really clear on its values and that we'd only work on projects that led to positive social benefit. So about 4 years in, I was a team of about 8, all women, all white women. And I had a new employee that started that just said to me, like, what are you doing here? Like, why does everybody kind of look the same? Where's the difference? And, that was just such a catalyst of a moment for me to go, yeah, you're right. Like we communicate about multiculturalism, for example, but we don't reflect it within our own staff. And so from that moment, I started to become a lot more dedicated to this idea of inclusion. And it kind of runs two ways for me, because not only am I dedicated to having inclusion within my own staff, but it's changed my entire business model now, because I'm completely dedicated to inclusion in how we communicate and who we talk to. So in 2019, I acquired a multicultural media company called Cultureverse. And we set about developing what we call a localization arm, where we have developed internally our ability to translate materials into 57 different languages. I've also built up the team's capability to write easy English, enabling materials to become accessible to people with disability. And I've formed a partnership with First Nations media to ensure that we also incorporate Aboriginal audiences in what we do. And I've got to say, the more inclusive that we become and the more we talk about inclusive communication, the more success my business is experiencing from a financial perspective. So we grew 80% in the last financial year, and doesn't look like we're stopping anytime soon. So we have a team of 42, and I'm out there recruiting for another person, and then it'll be another one. And it's such an exciting time. I'm completely and totally committed to the idea of inclusivity, and I believe it's our future. So
thank you. This is why you three are the perfect panelists for our topics today. Anna?
Thanks. Amazing to hear your stories from your own words. I know we've been doing a bit of background research on you, but it's nothing like hearing it from the founder themselves. We want to touch on a little bit around kind of confidence and doubt, and I'm sure, you know, we all feel these at times. And Eliza, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about whether or not there's been a time where you've kind of been in doubt and unsure of what you're doing, and if so, how you overcame that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's firstly to realize that self-doubt is innately a human thing, but I think I've always inherently been pretty good with dealing with self-doubt, because you can very much, I think, mentally change the way that you see self-doubt by what you convince it to be. For me, you know, it's an innate human thing to say before you go into anything, like, yeah, we pause, and you can pause and have that silent time to be filled with self-doubt, or you can fill it with something like reflection, which is something that I you know, always do before going into anything. And if you're, you know, for instance, from Monash, you know that our motto is Ankara Amparo, which, like, we all make a big joke out of, but actually, like, in reality, that's truth. Like, we're always learning, is what Monash's motto is, and that's basically, like, we're always on this mountain that's going up, and we're always stretching up this big hill, and essentially you can choose to either, like, look up and be like, shit, there's so much to do, or there's so much, you know, I can't overcome this, or you can look back at everything that you've achieved to get to where you are and be really reflective and choose to operate that time and make it really productive. And so probably a good example of what self-doubt looks for me is, ironically, you know, every time that I've gone into a meeting with, for instance, when I was like a year back, when I've gone to meetings with Anna and Nikki and Dave, probably actually that was the time when I had the most self-doubt, walking from my car in the car park at Monash's Caulfield to, you know, level 9 at where Entrepreneurship sits, and just being like, holy crap, like, I'm actually going to see and, like, talk about my idea to these people. You know, there's always a chance of being rejected. There's always a chance of being, you know, having your ask not fulfilled. And that's by no means a reflection of, you know, Dave and Nikki and whatnot, but you can also, like, I also took that time to be like, walking from the car to the meeting, just, wow, we've come so far. Like, I've done this course with them, and they're coming to support me further. Like, I'm just here to just talk through and just think about everything that, you know, you've done to get to this point. And I think that is a much more empowering way to use that pause before, you know, you go in and do anything. And that's probably the way that I've been able to overcome it the most. But also equally, I think it's, again, an innate human trait to pause before that big sort of moment in time that you're having self-doubt about. And then on the reverse side, to equally give enough time to celebrate and reflect afterwards. And that allows you to feel like, wow, I did this thing. And then the next time you go into sort of another big event that gets your nerves going, you can feel like, wow, that feeling afterwards, the thing I did before, you know, that's what I'm sort of aiming for. That's, you know, empowering to go into the next thing for. So a balance between before and after, and using that time for reflection rather than filling it with self-doubt is my way to go.
Yeah, I love it. It's such an easy thing to do, to kind of think, I haven't done enough, or what can I do better? And I think, you know, when you own your own business or you're working on your own project, to stop and think and look back of how far you've come is a really easy thing to forget to do, and something that everyone can benefit from doing more. So love that analogy of the up and down the mountain. It's great.
And following on from that, Zavit, you work a lot with people and businesses who experience imposter syndrome and self-doubt. What are some common things that you see and how do you help people to overcome them?
Okay, I may start by sharing with you that the first time that I've been asked to work with women about imposter syndrome, my response was I can actually teach people to have imposter syndrome, right? Rather to how to avoid it. And the reason is why October is dyslexia month. So I'm dyslexic. And for me, high school was not the best place in the world. I never thought that I will have a PhD. I never thought that I will be an executive and nor own my own company. And when I wanted to study the course at Harvard, the decision-making leadership, I knew how hard it is to get into the course. And so I've decided that I'm not applying. And my husband said, well, just apply, you know. It's going to take you a few hours to write all those explanations why you should get it in all this. Just apply. Worst case, you won't get in. But I said to him, well, for my own self-confidence, that's the last thing that I need. Anyway, he convinced me and I applied. And for 6 weeks, we haven't heard anything. And then one morning at 7 a.m., I woke up and I had a congratulation email. I was quiet the entire day and literally checked my email all day long just to check that, you know, another one is not coming saying, sorry, we didn't mean to send it to you, it's a mistake. And only in the evening, that's true, I had the courage to say to my family that I got into Harvard. So, and all this period of between going to study at Harvard and this, I kept on having yes, I got it, I deserve it. No, maybe I'm not as smart and or as good as the others. And when we came to the first day, the first thing that they said, we chose you specifically from all the thousands of people. Each one of you deserves to be here. And I looked around and I was not the only one who said, like, or who did like, oh, you know, like, and that's not only women, men as well, were, you know, I wasn't the only one with the imposter syndrome. Having said that, what we really, part of what we did is understand how the brain functions and what decision-making is and how our stress and our self-doubt and our imposter syndrome actually influence our journeys in decision making. I've taken these learnings into the entrepreneurship, and this is what I'm working with people. So I'm not a psychologist and I'm not treating anyone, but I do explain to the entrepreneurs what's happening in our thinking, in our mind, and then I provide them tools to support them in focusing on what to do now, the rational, moving from the fear to the rational mind. So, you know, how to build rapport and prepare to speak with potential investors, or how to overcome resistance, or, you know, no is not yet, it's not a no, and things like that. About a year and a half ago, if I remember correctly, I've been asked to do a research about the barriers that female founders in the ecosystem face, and to put recommendations for policy in place. And one of the things that was very strong is this self-doubt and imposter syndrome. More than 40% of the female founders, we're talking about very successful founders, a lot of them had this like an apologetic attitude, you know, always almost apologizing for their success, waiting to see maybe it will stop somewhere, explaining their success as luck. But also you can see it in other areas. We tend to go to investors and ask for less money than male founders do, and like I have actual numbers, there's research about it, tend to give the credit to others for our own work and success. So these are the type of the stuff that I see in the market. But the way for me to work, because I'm not a psychologist, I work through the decision-making processes and providing practical tools that they can just focus on the tools and work rather than focus on worries.
Absolutely. And I think that leads nicely into the next question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, touching on that kind of building capability and uncovering or realizing the value that you have, a lot of people struggle with that. And Jen, I'm wondering, I've kind of got two questions here and one for you, but I'm wondering, you know, as you're like building a growing team and have a startup yourself, what do you think some of the key entrepreneurial capabilities are for the future, and what can we do as a community to support others in developing these capabilities?
Yeah, I think a lot of what Zavit was talking about really resonated. Like, I remember my first job in publishing, and within about 6 months, the owner of the business sat me down and said, "Oh, you know, you've got so much potential. You know, you could be leading this business." And I think they gave me a 10 grand pay rise. And in my head, I was like, I'm gonna get fired. Like, there was such a split between reality versus what was going on in my mind. And I actually threw myself into psychology because I went through a really hard time in my early 20s. And there was so much that was actually stopping me from what I wanted to do. I always knew what I wanted to do, but I just had so much stuff to sort out. So for me, self-awareness and understanding yourself is just so incredibly important as an entrepreneur. And I'm scared of getting out of bed most mornings. Like, I'm actually quite an anxious person, but I get that that's who I am and I work with it. And yeah, so I think the biggest skill that you need to develop, and how we can encourage each other to do it, is that self-awareness. I call it self-actualization. And then just pushing past that, just doing it, just you know, sitting with it, understanding why there's all these objections in your mind, and just doing it anyway. And that's so incredibly important. And being able to tell those very, I guess, honest stories, because there's just so much, you know, I call it business porn, just all these incredible success stories of how people have just cruised through. But it's not. If you're putting yourself out there, if you're creating something very new, I think entrepreneurs generally sit outside a system, so they're already feeling a bit outcast. So the self-confidence, I just don't think, is naturally going to be there for a lot, even though these people have great minds and want to do great things. So it's just being honest about how bloody hard it is, and how confronting it is when you set up your own business. And the no that you get when you're trying to sell something in someone else's business is nowhere near as crushing as the no you get when you set up your own business and you feel that directly. So it hurts. It's hard. It's horrible sometimes. It's great too.
I agree. I think naming it and calling it out, which is very similar to what you were saying, Eliza, about, you know, self-doubt's innately human, and Zavit, what you were saying about it, you know, you can explain what's actually going on in the brain, and just being aware of it and being like, okay, that's normal, and not trying to overcome it or have some kind of process where you trick yourself out of it, is, yeah, it's so important. It makes it a lot easier to just be like, we all have it, you know, and that's okay.
Absolutely. Like Zavit said before with that book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And on that note, Zavit, for our students that are starting out, you know, in entrepreneurship, wanting to start their own business, what advice would you give to them how to put their capabilities into practice in order to start a new venture?
So you can either wait with your entrepreneurship if you don't feel that you are still ready, or start now. But what is important is to have this constant learning attitude. And Jen said it's self-awareness. We keep on have to continue understand what we're doing, what we need to improve on, and continue learning. So appoint a mentor, be involved in the ecosystem and go, you know, to events and participate. Continuously speak with your potential clients to understand their pains, what is going on. Continue develop yourself. There's nothing that scares me more than people who think that they are perfect. And I just had a couple of conversations like just that recently, you know, looking into appointing an executive for a certain scale up, and the person has nothing to improve on. No, not that I'm aware. Well, I'm perfect. And you're kind of thinking what type of leadership it is, and what does it mean, and how it just, I don't think it can work. Founders is an amazing journey, right? But it has its ups and downs. So we need to be resilient. But the only way to get to the up is to learn from the down and to look for the future and say, all right, to be where I want to be, these are the areas that I need to improve on and how I'm going to get there.
Absolutely. I think Carol Dweck's concept around the growth mindset, I don't know if you're familiar with her work, is so important. And having that beginner's mindset is actually sometimes often an advantage because you're not going there with preconceived notions.
And one of the ways to achieve it is actually to surround yourself with diversity. Mm-hmm. So rather than with the people who think like you, who are your friends, who are you, and will tell you what you want to hear, is actually surround yourself, like Jen mentioned, surround yourself with team members and with people from different diversity of cultures, of ages, of experiences, of disciplines they come from, you know, all sort of diversity. It's not just gender. The more diverse view that we will hear, the better we will then be able to understand, you know, how, because we see the world via our own lenses, mm-hmm. and we need to extend them.
Absolutely.
On that note, Jen, you were mentioning to us the other day about how diversity is one of your core business commitments. And I'm wondering if you could share with us a little bit about your thoughts on why so many Australian businesses haven't been greatly successful at building diverse workplaces, and why it's been so successful for you to do that.
Yeah, okay. I think it's really, it's multifactorial, and it's kind of complex as well. So I think Australia, Melbourne and Sydney in particular, with its, you know, bluestone foundations and its traditions and its schools and its networks, doesn't particularly allow for a lot of diversity in terms of the pipeline of where people end up in jobs and the decisions and the investment decisions they make in startups. It all tends to be this very insular circle of people, and it's hard for people with diverse backgrounds, you know, women, migrants, people with disability, anybody to I guess tap into that very traditional investment group in Australia. And that, I know that that's backed by research as well. It's not just a hunch. It's been shown that unless you kind of come from money, unless you can tap into family and friends, your chances of getting angel or VC capital in Australia are very, very slim. That's just the reality. So I think that's really sad. And I think one of the issues is that there are actually a lot of very successful entrepreneurs out there from different backgrounds, but their stories don't get told. You don't tend to read it in newspapers as much or in case studies. And I think that just perpetuates this idea that you can only really be a top shelf successful entrepreneur if you're a white bloke. So I think that there's a lot of work to be done in founders of businesses from diverse backgrounds that are willing and able to come out and tell their story. It's media that is willing and able to publish those stories. And then it's people from diverse backgrounds who then get the confidence to start building networks with each other and develop a bit of movement that might actually even sit outside the existing network that exists. So also, I think if you look at any study, you know, 10% of people in Australia are pretty sexist or racist. You kind of write them off. That's just that's reality. Study after study show there's a pretty solid 10%. You can't move them. So just whatever, just forget about them. But there's that whole middle ground. And, you know, I was talking about that self-awareness part, and that's great. But then the next step is what Zavit was saying, and that is then surrounding yourself with all these different people that think about things in such different ways. You know, my business now has people, we can speak over 26 different languages as a staff. And, you know, the translators and interpreters we've got represent thinking from over 57 different language groups. And the richness and the strength that comes with that, I just can't downplay. But at the same time, it also brings about this feeling of shame and awkwardness, because I might not necessarily know how to pronounce everybody's name. Our celebrations are going to have to be different in my workplace. We can't have, it's not appropriate to have Friday night drinks anymore as the central point of celebration, because I've got a whole lot of staff now that don't drink. So everything has to be looked at from a different lens. There's a lot of change that needs to happen in order to be genuinely inclusive, and that takes time and effort. And I just think people just look at it and go, oh yeah, nah, like it's unfortunate, but I reckon that's part of it.
Yeah, I think the sentiment and the idea is often there, and then the actual willingness to put yourself in an uncomfortable position to actually change things sustainably, as you have, can often be the point where people get lost.
You mentioned networks, and Eliza, I want to throw over to you for this one. As a young entrepreneur who started a business whilst you're still studying, how did you build your network and leverage it to build Halad to Health?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really the only thing to this is really just putting yourself out there at every opportunity you can, especially whilst you're in uni. And uni is very much this safety net of connections around you, and everyone's uni experience is going to be different. And it's what you make out of uni that is the value of it, not necessarily the course itself. So definitely putting yourself out there, because if you really think about it, like for all of us, we all started from zero at some point. And especially like Jen was saying, when you come from a migrant background like myself, I didn't come from a wealthy family where my parents could introduce me to anything or anyone. And if anything, I came from an Asian background where, if you do come from an Asian background, you probably know if you're starting a business, you want to like not tell your parents as much as possible. So you're probably starting at like a -10 network, because you're trying to avoid people knowing what you're doing. So it's incredibly, difficult at start, but if anything, I think networking you should sort of see as like an exponential curve. At every exponential curve at the very beginning, it's so slow and stagnant, and it feels like you're getting nowhere. But what I would do early days when I was in like first, second year of university, quite literally go on LinkedIn and like find people who are in the social impact space, try and find people who were like mutual friends with like Dan Flynn from like Thank You Water, and people who would probably like know ideas like that. And just ask to be able to sit down and meet with them, and also go into those meetings being like, of course, you're so grateful to be able to meet with them and ask them questions, but also not expect that some revelation is going to come out of that meeting, but more so know that that's a leading stone to maybe introducing you to someone else who might be able to speak with you. And just, it is just a stepping stone, and not thinking, okay, I've bombed that, or it's the be all or end all. And you will have that stagnant period for years. It's a long process to build your networks. But you'll only see the rewards when you realize that when you meet someone, you don't just open yourself to someone, but all of their networks too. They now know who you are, and they will introduce you to all of these other people. And that's when you see starting that exponential curve of, wow, like, I'm getting to meet all these other people that people are introducing me to that I don't even have to actively go out and seek. And that is essentially, how Halad, also started in terms of who we know. For instance, we met one person, for example, when we really were cash strapped from one Rotary Club. We pitched there, that didn't go well, referred to another Rotary Club, probably did that like 3-4 times over, and only that last one was able to give us a grant. And then after that, opened us to their networks in the Philippines, and the story from there. So it's very much about putting yourself out there. And if, you know, you get rejected from the first pitch or the first, you know, meeting or whatnot, just always see it as a stepping stone, because you've now opened yourself to their networks, because they know people too.
Long game. Anna, do you want to can we squeeze in one more?
Yeah, I reckon one more before we go over to the Q&A. I think we could talk all day though, to be completely honest. There's a wealth of knowledge between the three of you. So just a quick one before we go over to Shreya. Jen and Zivit, I'm wondering, you know, if you could quickly share with us what role networking and building a network around your businesses has had in kind of creating the business and then also sustaining it. Zivit, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Anna. First, I really want to make it clear that when you need your network, it's too late to start developing it. So networking skills, we have to start working, you know, as soon as we can. And I realized that when I came here 16 years ago and I had no network, and you know, in Israel it would be much easier for me, but here I had no networking and zero networking skills. So you know, if you go to an event and you would find someone standing in the corner not speaking with anyone, that would be me. And if people would come to speak with me, I'll get stuck to continue work, you know, that was me. But I realized that it doesn't work like that when you know, because I had to, and I actually took a coach for networking, and I had to get out of my comfort zone to learn new skills. Years later, it became my nature. I love having coffees with people. I'm suffering from Zoom. I'm waiting to get out of this closure or whatever you call it. But when I opened different thinking, my concern was, I'm not from here, and I don't have a good network, and I don't have sales skills. And that's when I realized that I was actually networking naturally without knowing, and that I actually have an amazing network. And yes, I don't have sales skills, but my network explained to me that don't look at it as sales, just have coffees with people, build rapport, and ask, you know, just ask. And when you just ask, when you have your network in place and they know you, it's not the first time that you meet with them and you're asking, you know, you're requesting, you already built good relationships with them. My network actually built my business, and up until now, I haven't done any marketing. Just recently, on a call, someone asked me, how come you've gained 4 new clients during COVID? And I said, well, it just came. One came from a client, 2 are from my network from, you know, 2 years ago. All of a sudden there is a need. So I really, if there is one thing from my perspective to emphasize, is that it's all right not to have networking skills, but if you realize that, start working on it. And if you do have those skills, then build your network, keep in touch with people you never know. You just can't just come and start asking them. People will, it doesn't come out of the blue. We need to develop those relationships.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Jen, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just think meeting people, if you want to become an entrepreneur, and it's so great to meet people who've already been there and done that, to really start to kind of pave out your way to creating that as your reality. And I've always had people who are kind of mentors, champions all along the journey. But they're not someone you ever take for granted. There's someone you kind of, it's like you need to water the plant, you know, you need to stay in touch, you need to stay connected. But yeah, certainly through COVID, I was amazed, because obviously it was a terrifying time, but I was amazed at how many clients that I hadn't seen for, you know, 4 or 5 years reached out to want to work with us during that this time. And it's just testament to, I guess, I don't have thousands of connections. I've just got really good, close, tight ones. And that's what's really important to me. I'm a terrible networker for lots of people. I can't do small talk. So yeah, just one connection per networking event, and I'm very pleased.
Yeah, quality over quantity, I think.
Yeah.
Alrighty, I think we're going to bring in the fabulous Shreya now. She's got a couple of questions lined up from the audience. Welcome, Shreya. Over to you.
Hi guys, I think it was a great talk. I myself as a student learned so much from this chat. Just bringing up some questions from the audience and some that I have myself. The first question's to you, Jen, because I think this is really relevant because you spoke about being an anxious person. I'll quickly read it out. As someone who's a perfectionist, often overcoming self-doubt is difficult. I just opened my startup a month ago, and every day I felt the anxiety in the future of my business. Do you have any perspective in how I can strengthen the confidence both in myself and my startup, and how to get over this notion of needing to always achieving perfection? So this is a question we received anonymously. Over to you.
I can relate. And you know, the first year of starting my business, first two, I was just terrified every day. You know, I wasn't actually that busy, and like I'd get up in the morning and I'd make just a ton of calls to do what Eliza was talking about, and that's just going out and talking to people, and then, you know, no one would call me back. And so I'd sit there in the afternoon exhausted and just go, wow, like, now what do I do? And of course, that's when you start reading these business success stories, and it feels like everybody else is, you know, doing this amazing job at 10 times the speed that you can do. And what if I fail? And I can't downplay how anxious I was through that time. And I'd studied business. I felt like I was intellectually ready, but emotionally, I just didn't realize how much of a toll it was going to take. Again, psychology for me was really important, to just be speaking to somebody about it and just working through why I was feeling that way and what some coping mechanisms were. And then also just getting myself involved. And I wish back then, 10 years ago, there had been all these startup communities. There were only just a handful back then, but there are so many other people going through what you're going through. And the biggest mistake I made was just to isolate myself from it all. And I wish I had reached out and actually connected in with more people, because it's really tough and isolating, for sure.
Yeah, I think that really answers the question. Just being around people who are similar to us or are in a similar position helps, I think.
Yeah.
So I have the next question for Eliza. So you have actually grown Halal to Health during the pandemic, which is, I think, very hard. Can you tell us more about how you manage the communications and operations during these tough times?
Okay, yeah, good question. Thanks, Shreya. Well, to give context, yes, we have grown incredibly over the pandemic. In the last 6 months, we've grown 10x in our Australian operations as well as in the Philippines, which is incredible. And so there has, obviously at the start of the pandemic, there was a lot of onboarding of new team members as well. And I think to also give context, all of our team members here in Australia, we have about 20 or so and then 10 in the Philippines, and we're all students. Everyone is under the age of, well, despite myself and my co-founder, everyone is in uni or in high school. So it's particularly hard to work with people's schedules, you could imagine, because they're all going to school full time. But the ability to be extraordinarily flexible operation-wise has been, you know, the reason why we can get to where we are now. I guess how we communicate operationally, obviously we're all in Slack. Practically wise, you know, we all find I think we try our best, and I think this is a good concept of determining what things need to be in synchronous meetings and what can be delivered asynchronously. So what is really important that we're all here for a meeting, because we only have 1 hour a week with our Philippines team, with our Australia team. That needs to be the most pressing thing, and not wasting anyone's time in that thing, in that time. And always at the top of that meeting time should always be some sort of team building activity, and then, you know, operational things, but otherwise asynchronously, so things you can put on Slack and people can contribute to. Otherwise that's I guess been the way that we have gone. But I think the reason why we've been able to communicate and operate so well and grow is that at every small milestone on our Slack, we celebrate every small milestone together. So we all have this momentum. Doesn't matter if you're working from 7 to 9 p.m. and someone else is working from 7 to 9 a.m. We're all seeing the same momentum go past, and it's not just myself and my co-founder knowing that, it's everyone who does the smallest things, from editing the correction on the form to making sure that the thing goes live, running the next event. You know, we all know that we're all in this uphill journey together, and we're all on, you know, that little slight dip up on that exponential curve.
Yeah, I think that's really useful for us who are trying to find motivation in their isolation. So thanks for that. My next question is for Zibit. Zibit, as you know, you've actually worked with a lot of startups. So you know how Melbourne and more broadly Australia is a multicultural. Can you share your thoughts on how you see it having a positive influence on businesses and startups?
Oh, wow, that's a difficult question. So I believe that the multiculturalism brings different views to the table and different risks tolerance. Okay, the Australian culture is very, very low on taking risks. And if you look at the why some Australian entrepreneurs struggle at the beginning, it's because none of their parents or close family was working in entrepreneurship. They come from big companies with an income that is promised, a very predictable career plan, and all of a sudden their kids want to open a company and do something so risky. We can also see that even our investors take less risks than investors in other countries. And that's a culture. The tolerance for risk is different here, but multiculturalism, people from different countries and cultures bring different views to the table. Unfortunately, we're not speaking enough about their successes. We're not celebrating enough their successes. But if we will look at some of the great achievements in Australia, for example, Airwallex, right? It's multiculturalism, started with international students. So I actually believe multiculturalism brings a lot of value. Having said that, it will be incorrect to say that it's not challenging. Okay, the journey we have to go through is more difficult. Sometimes I say very out loud, and I know it doesn't sound good, but I actually had once, I spoke, I was asked to speak in an event, and I called it starting from minus, because it feels to me, that's my personal perspective, that men who are Australian or European based start, when you don't know them, start from 100, and if they, disappoint you, they'll go down. Australian born women start from 0 and they need to prove themselves, but people that come from different cultures, peoples with disabilities, people that are a bit different start from minus. They really, really need to prove themselves. And I know it doesn't sound well, but that's my own feeling. It took me a while to get out of the minus. I don't feel in the minus anymore, but I felt that I really am struggling because I need to develop my own well, it's not only in entrepreneurship. When I came in, I was looking for my first HR position. I had one recruiter who said to me that there's an amazing position for me, but I'll need to change my name on the resume because the CEO wouldn't want to meet with me. And I said to him, seriously, and I said to him, well, a CEO that doesn't want to meet with me because of my name is not a cultural match anyway. I had a recruiter that said to me on the phone that she will never be able to help me because HR is just for Australians. She never met with me. She just heard my accent. I do have accent. What can I do? You know, so the journey is a bit different. But there are amazing people on the way to tap into as mentors and as supporters. Yeah. Hope I answered the question.
Yeah, that was really useful. Anna, do I have like 5 seconds more? I just want to ask. So Zibit, just taking on from what you were saying, what are your recommendations from your experience to these students or international students to step into the industry? You know, like you said, starting from the minus or the negative. So what do you think are the skill sets that we need to work on?
I think it's the same skill set that every entrepreneur needs, from the leadership to the networking to having the self-awareness. That it's all the same. So, but what I'd like to recommend, and that's my personal view, others may not agree with it, is to try and diversify your network as well. So don't just stay within your peers. I mean, when you go into university, you tend to see people gathering socially according to where they come from. That's natural, but you do need to collaborate with others. And diversity goes to all the directions. So this is one, and the other, just be out there. Like, I have approached people that I did not believe that will be available to mentor me, that will agree to mentor me, and they have mentored me from the day one. And they are not Israelis, and they're not from the community that, you know, I'm supposed to. Just approach others that you feel that you can learn from, and ask them to mentor you, and you'll be surprised how amazing people. And by the way, from day one, I have mentors, but I always am mentoring others. So it's which is another skill, but that's another way to grow as well.
Thank you so much, Zibit, for that.
Thanks, Sharia. Fantastic. All right. We are just a few minutes over 2, and I'm conscious of time, but I'm wondering if the 3 of you are okay if we go a few minutes over time. Is that all right?
Sure thing.
Awesome. Now, Nikki, do you want to ask the final question before we wrap it up?
Let's call it a rapid fire question. So if there was one thing that everyone here today could do to make entrepreneurship and startup communities a better, more inclusive and diverse space, what would it be? Eliza, do you want to kick us off?
Sure, I'm clearly not so very good at rapid fire, but the one thing would definitely be for us to think differently about what commitment looks like and how we currently define commitment. For example, right now, you know, full-time as a startup founder sounds like, you know, you're extraordinarily committed. You're a first-generation migrant background, or from a different background, you might be, for instance, have, you know, family business commitments that don't allow you to have the same exact time schedule that what currently a full-time, you know, thing on paper would look like. And that by no means should disqualify people from having access to opportunities on accelerator programs or programs to be on different, you know, other things to help you start up. So yeah, that'd be, I think, change the definition of commitment.
Love it. Jen?
Wow, I'm so blown away by Eliza and Zibit. I just think it's being bold and probably, yeah, getting beyond your own networks and just and being brave. And you know, that starting from zero and starting from negatives a bit, I get it, but I'm totally committed to turning that model on its head and harnessing the amazing skills and networks and insights that you know, migrant communities and women and people from lower socioeconomic groups actually bring to the table, and it's people having the courage to go out and tell their stories and make those connections and start those businesses that's ultimately going to turn things. So I think it's just having the confidence, or building the confidence, and finding ways just to do what you want to do. Just do it.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Zavir, any last piece of advice?
Sorry, were you asking me?
So going forward from today, there's just one piece of practical advice, just one, that people can take on board to make our communities more inclusive and diverse.
I thought about it, and my answer is I don't know in general. I think we can only control ourselves, right? So for me, is walk the walk.
Mm-hmm.
Don't talk the talk. Is really be inclusive, understand what diversity is, embrace diversity. We can't control others, but we can make the change ourselves.
Absolutely, I'm a firm believer in that. Anna?
Amazing. I am feeling so inspired, and Jen, much like you've just said, I'm completely blown away by the three of you. I think you all have such different journeys and stories, and you know, you're all making such positive contributions to, you know, the people that you work with and employ, and also the communities around entrepreneurship. So thank you so much for your time.